Okay, hello and welcome back. So, we are at the fourth session of this course on artificial intelligence for beginners, and today we are going to talk about the history of artificial intelligence. Now, I know that it's not one of the most interesting topics for a lot of people, but in order to understand where the technology is heading, we need to understand where the technology came from. And that is why history of any concept, including artificial intelligence, is so important to understand. So I'm going to keep it short. I'm not going to stretch this video a lot, but I'm going to cover some of the milestones which have been accomplished in the area of artificial intelligence, and hopefully it'll make sense to you that where all the journey started and what kind of a progress AI has made in such a short duration of time, respectively. So, in the year 1952, it was Arthur Samuel who actually developed the first self learning computer program. Now, even though this computer could not do a lot of functionalities, but in the year 1952, it was a really big deal, and the roots of artificial intelligence was starting to grow. But it was John McCarthy, one of the pioneers in computer sciences, who is actually also known as, if not officially, but at least unofficially, the father of artificial intelligence. He actually created a language called Lisp, which acted as a workforce of AI. He was also one of the primary conveners of the Dartmouth Conference, which actually, once again, is the pivotal moment where artificial intelligence was born. Right. Moving forward in the year 1961, so this is almost 10 years after Arthur Samuel's discovery, the first industrial robot called Unimate was created, worked perfectly, and used very basic functionalities. But once again, this was a sign that machines could do some activities by themselves. In the same decade, Joseph Weizenbaum invents Eliza, an English speaking robot. Now, this was a huge achievement because Eliza was not only able to speak but also, once again, was able to perform certain functions which were limited to humans before that. Uh, Another 10-15 years later, in the year 1978, XCON was developed. Now, what exactly was XCON? It was developed to configure computer based on user demand. Now, this was not very different from what computers were supposed to do, but once again, XCON was provided this capability to not only understand the what what can you say, to understand the commands given by humans, but also interpret them in more than one way. So that's all what AI is about. Another 10 years, 8 years down the line, now once again, this was a huge major achievement that a driverless car was actually created by Ernst Dickmans and his team. So Tesla is not the first driverless car, but it was actually first created in 1986. Now, as you can imagine, that car had a huge load of limitations associated with it. But even to come up with that concept, even putting it on not just on paper, but actually creating something, how well it worked, how well it didn't work, that's an entirely different discussion. But at least creating something which could have today led to Tesla was actually done in the year 1986. And then comes the big moment of artificial intelligence. In the year 1997, Deep Blue was a chess playing computer created by IBM, and it was like the biggest, most significant achievement in the area of artificial intelligence. So, a machine was actually able to beat the reigning world champion Gary, and this was massive. I mean, you can't even imagine that a computer, a machine who has been taught to play chess, was actually able to defeat a world champion, right? So you can imagine how significant an impact this would have had in the area of AI. So what Deep Blue did, it actually opened a plethora of opportunities for people in AI, and there was this motivation with which people were leading towards AI and trying to consider new possibilities in the field. So down the years after 1997, we saw a lot of accomplishments in the area. Similarly, in the year 2000, right in the beginning of the 21st century, Kismet was developed by Cynthia Brettziel, which could actually recognize and simulate emotions. Now, once again, this was a huge step when we spoke about a machine, because taking commands, interpreting them is a different ball game. Beating a world champion, huge accomplishment, but actually being able to recognize and simulate human emotions is one of the primary aspect for which AI was developed. 10-15 years down the line, Google DeepMind's AlphaGo. Now, once again, Go is one of the most famous board game in the world, and AlphaGo was developed by Google. Once again, a machine was able to successfully defeat Lee Sedol, the reigning world champion of Go. And once again, this created ripples all across not just the AI industry, but also in the Go community, because this was an unprecedented act which was done by a machine. Last but not the least, in 2017, I think we have already spoken about this in one of our lessons, but Facebook actually had to shut down an experiment after two of its bots started talking to each other in a language which was not even known to the developers. Now we know there are varying opinions about this. That was it a different language, or was it something the machine was trying to do, or which would provide it the maximum rewards. Now you will understand this better once I have covered the concept of machine learning and how rewards work for machines. But for the time being, I just want you to understand that in this slide you can see the journey of AI right from 1952 all the way up to say 2017, 2018. So in all these years, artificial intelligence has grown leaps and bounds. And how is that? Simply because a concept was born in the year 1952, that can we have a machine which can simulate human actions, and today we are two machines speaking to each other in a language which humans are unable to interpret. If that is not accomplishment, I don't know what is. Moving on, if you remember, I spoke something about the Dartmouth conference. Now this is actually known as one of the founding conferences for artificial intelligence, and Mr. John McCarthy was the orchestrator for all these things to happen. And this is what he actually said in the conference, that every aspect of learning or any other feature of intelligence can in principle be so precisely described that a machine can be made to simulate it. An attempt will be made to find out how to make machines use language, form abstractions and concepts, solve kind of problems now reserved for humans, and improve themselves. Every word of this line is dripping of AI, right? I mean, we are still trying to achieve some of these things, but some of these things have already been achieved by data scientists. So, for example, natural language processing, or NLP, is a very critical component of AI these days, and this is what John McCarthy had said way back in 1956, that if we are able to make machines use languages, and not just computer languages, but today, as of now, we are actually able to make machines interpret, understand, and interpret English as a language, and not just English, there are so many other languages. Now, how the entire process takes place is obviously it's up for discussion, but end of the day a machine is now able to interpret something told to it in English, and that once again is a huge achievement. Okay, so why are we back to history of artificial intelligence? You might be thinking that aren't we already done with it? Well, there are certain more aspects to the history of artificial intelligence, and I thought that I'll just cover them here quickly for your understanding. So, and if you want to skip all this part and just move on to the next session, you're free to do so, because I'll not be covering any theory or any kind of a concept in this. Is just more of an overview of what are some of the things and how the journey of AI has been in the past 50-60 years. So as you can see on my screen, the GPS, not the global positioning system, but the general problem solver, was actually designed somewhere in the 1950s to imitate human problem solving skills. Right. Why do we want machines to solve our problems? Well, because we are humans and it's our innate nature to be lazy. Okay, believe it or not, it is, and we are always finding ways on how something can be done more easily. And that is why we want that machines should be able to solve certain problems which possibly we might take more time to do. Similarly, a considerable achievement here was by Newell and Simon, who came up with something known as the physical symbol system. What exactly was it? It basically had the necessary and sufficient means for general intelligent action. So once again, a machine which would try to interpret physical symbols and make sense out of it. That was the whole objective behind Newell and Simon's discovery. Also, Herbert Galanter established the geometry theorem prover. So, all in all, basically, all the scientists were trying that can machines actually solve problems related to physics, related to chemistry, related to maths, more importantly, the logical problems which we take more time in order to solve, right? And the easiest example of that is the calculator. So, these scientists were actually looking for a more skilled calculator. So as to say, I'm just trying to oversimplify it, but I just need you to understand the concept. What was happening with John McCarthy's life? Well, he moved on from Dartmouth to MIT, where he actually developed Lisp, the language which was dominating the AI era for the next 30 years. And I think I already mentioned it in the first slide as well. He also published a paper called Programs with Common Sense. And similarly, in '63, there was this brilliant scientist called James Slagle who developed Saint. Once again, this was a software, a program which could solve closed form calculus integration problems known to be one of the most difficult in mathematics. Similarly, Daniel Borrow developed something known as a Student, which could solve algebra story problems. And once again, similar software were being developed all across primarily the US at this point of time. Okay, so all is going well for artificial intelligence, but bam, we are back to reality. So, what went wrong? Well, Herbert Simon, the individual in your picture right now, actually predicted that an AI would be able to beat. Okay, I'm missing the word beat here. So, an AI system should be able to beat a chess champion in a decade, or actually become a chess champion in a decade. Now, this gentleman said this thing somewhere in the 1960s or the 1970s. We know that this did not happen till 1997. Now, this overconfidence was because whatever software was being created or whatever machines were being trained to do, they were able to do all those things because of the fact that these were very simple problems, right, related to a certain field. And this could actually not generalize what an AI should be able to do. And the ability of the AI neural networks to actually learn new things was extremely limited. Can I give you an example of this? Yes, I can give you multiple examples of this. So, if I create a smart device, right? Many of us have these smart devices in our homes these days. Can it drive your car? No, it can't. Can it open the door? Maybe it can if you connect it to a sensor. But what if it's a smart kettle? Uh, can it switch on your AC? Once again, today with the help of IoT, all these things are possible. But what I'm trying to tell you is that a smart device is still not that smart because it has its own limitations, it has its own limited actions which it can perform, and if you take it out of its comfort zone, it cannot do that. But we as humans are supposed to do this every day. And here is a brilliant example of what went wrong. So, a famous quote was, "The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." And when an AI system was actually asked to translate it, it literally translated it to, "The vodka is good, but the meat is rotten." And I don't think a lot has changed. Even today, when we use Google Translate, we still come up with these difficulties. So you can imagine how the situation was, say, 30, 40 years ago. So all the brilliant men and women in the room came around and they said that, listen, we have to do something about it. I think we over exaggerated the use of AI and what it can accomplish. So we have to go back to the drawing board and get back to solving the actual problems and how we can generalize AI systems. So the Dendral program was actually developed by these gentlemen at Stanford University, and what were they exactly trying to do? They wanted to infer molecular structure from information by a mass spectrometer. If any of you didn't make if any of that didn't make any sense to you, it's absolutely okay. What I'm trying to tell you is that now they were trying to generalize the use of AI to more practical problems, right? Not just solving math problems or playing a game, for example. So Mycin was a perfect example of this. The machine was developed to diagnose blood infections, so the scientists were now actually trying to help out people and make better predictions for the future, so that it can help the society as a whole. And what was the major difference? Why were the machines suddenly starting to work better? I'm sorry about what I have just done here. So I just wanted you to see this last point here. So the major difference was the input being provided to the machines. What does that mean? If we go back to the lesson on data, I told you that a clean and structured data is so important to a machine, right? If you provided the proper data, which has been cleaned up and which is humongous in nature ideally, but even if not, it should be just cleaned up, right? If that data is provided to the machine, it can do wonders for you. Okay, so there was a lot of experimentation going in the academic world, and finally there was the confluence between academia and industry. And whenever this happens, wonders take place. So R1 was developed. What exactly was R1? It was the first commercial expert at Digital Equipment Corporation to configure orders for new computer systems. Basically, a stocking system, right? When we talk about inventory management in operations and supply chain, this is exactly what the machine was able to do. And it did wonders for the company. It actually saved the company almost $40 million in a year. And we are talking about sometimes in the 1980s. So you can imagine how much money the machine was able to save. Suddenly there was a boom. Everyone wanted an AI, everyone wanted a machine which was apparently so efficient than humans. Japan went on and announced a 10-year plan called the fifth generation to build intelligent systems. Similarly, so many other companies and countries were investing in AI systems. The entire industry went boom from millions to billions of dollars in 8 years. Even today, when we look around ourselves, we see a lot of chatbots, we see a lot of inventory management systems, robotics, natural language processors, artificial neuron networks, deep learning systems, and so on and so forth. Now, all this happened because a few individuals, maybe at Stanford University or MIT University, actually thought about implementing the effects of AI into our society, and that is why we have now been able to eat the fruits, right? So, which were sown, the seeds were sown way back in the 1970s or the 1980s. And yeah, I mean, this is exactly what I just told you. I think I wrote it down as well. So I know this video, I think, might have stretched out a bit more than I wanted it to, but the entire objective was for you to understand that how much the AI industry has traveled in these past 50 to 60 years, and how have we reached this point today. In the next video, we are going to talk about something known as the machine intelligence continuum. Once again, it's a brilliant interpretation of how we can categorize AI systems and what are the different capabilities of machines, and where are we today and where are we headed in the next 10, 20 or even 100 years. For now, that's all. Thanks for watching.